All right, everyone, please welcome back for her second appearance today, Christine Haskell. She is the founder of Dative.works, a leadership training and advisory firm focused on human, ethical, and system dimensions of technology. She's also joined us for a previous episode on driving data projects. You can go ahead and tune into that. That was released at the back end of 2024. Today, I'm very excited to talk with her about AI and digital literacy for teams, and also kind of, a preview for her coursework that'll be coming up at TDWI Orlando. So I'm excited to get into all of that good stuff here. But before we jump in, Christine, thank you again for your time today. How are you doing, and where do we find you?
I'm good. We're just getting over a heat wave. I'm in
Hmm.
Seattle. I guess heat waves in quotes for the West Coast because it's not nearly what people deal with on the East Coast. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Dative.works.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned, we had a great episode on driving data projects. I would hope everyone taps into that if you haven't already listened to it. And you can hear a little bit more about Christine's background as well in that episode. But for today's conversation, we're going to be talking about something very important, something that I'm sure that is being discussed, if not implemented, at various stages in companies around the world, AI and digital literacy, especially for teams. So, Christine, let me start here. As organizations look towards AI, what are the key challenges they face when balancing the push for innovation with the need to maintain existing business functions?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is what I call the AI readiness paradox. And that's the rush to adopt AI driven by competition and investor expectations or customer demand, but skipping over foundational work like data quality or governance or process maturity or cultural readiness. And that leads to unstable innovation. And so the real balancing act is maintaining the integrity of current operations while building for the future. And so that means resisting the urge to chase every new capability instead of sequencing innovation so that it strengthens rather than disrupts the core.
We hear often at TDWI that leadership often will be so excited about the possibilities of what can be unlocked that and maybe with their own framework, not understanding how important it is to do the due diligence prior to jumping into something like that. I can
Mhm.
imagine how those folks that are doing their best to meet both needs are struggling to figure out what's the best way to go about that. Is
Mhm.
that in your experience what you're seeing as well? I mean, is there or maybe has, the last year or two refocused leadership on the importance of taking the first steps before jumping into chasing innovation?
Yeah, I think what happens if organizations push innovation without that foundation, they often get those short-term wins that don't scale, like a pilot project that looks great in a demo but collapses in production. So, for example, like a chatbot that answers customer questions perfectly in testing but fails when it's connected to the messy real world data. Or worse, they create a shadow AI practices where individual teams implement tools that fragment data or duplicate effort or increase risk. Think about like marketing and sales and operations each buying their own AI analytics tools. And that happens all the time because they're all
Hmm.
in silos, right? And
Hmm.
and they don't talk to each other all the time. Or one group's operating too slowly and they're like, okay, you do you, and I'm gonna go off and kind of do my own thing. Um, and so, leaders can practically balance speed and stability. These don't need to be mutually exclusive. They can start identifying kind of no regrets investments, um, and improvements to data quality and integration and governance that benefit both systems and future AI projects. So, for instance, standardizing customer data fields so that sales, service, and billing all work for the same definitions, right?
Hmm.
Um, or then pilot innovations in contained environments, gather lessons and scale only when you have both technical and human systems ready, like testing an AI scheduling tool in one region before rolling it out company wide. And these are like the fundamental things that they're like the non-sexy projects that no one wants to do because they're not flashy. And and when I even talk about them, they sound like super boring. They sound like the plumbing projects of the 90s or like the early 2000s. But they're the projects that make or break the success of the company.
Hmm. No, I think you put that excellently, and I think within that, I think digital literacy, digital fluency, digital literacy is something that you bring up, especially in the coursework that we're going to be discussing here as well. And I would imagine that that's growing, even beyond just within organizations, like in the personal level, everyone out there may be exploring on their own time, and learning on their own time. But can you maybe define what digital literacy means for organizations, and if there is any overlap with data literacy or AI literacy there?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great segue. I couldn't have planted that question better myself. Like digital, I don't know what they're doing on their own time because like we're getting so inundated with fluency, literacy and fluency in every aspect of our life, right?
Hmm.
Law, health. You go down the supermarket aisle and you've got to read data on every label, right? So digital fluency is the ability to integrate technology, data, and human capabilities in service of business outcomes. There's all kinds of definitions everywhere, but essentially you have to map it to business impact. And it's broader than data fluency, which is about understanding and working with data. And it's broader than AI literacy, which is about knowing how AI works and where to apply it ethically.
Hmm.
And that's all subjective, right? So digital fluency is the connective tissue, the computational thinking, challenging machine outputs, selecting the right tools, aligning them to business models, collective, like cultivating adaptability, collaboration, critical thinking, so that the technology delivers value and context. And I think people are trying to pack a lot in to data literacy and digital. They're depending on what company you're in or what training you're getting. There's all these different flavors of what digital data and AI fluency is. And maybe even I'm giving you yet another one, but I'm trying to make them distinct for the purpose of this conversation, right? To just put some boundaries up. And digital fluency. So let's say like data fluency, understanding, interpreting, and working effectively with data. An example would be like a marketing manager sees churn, that a certain customer segment is leaving faster than others, right? And asks deeper questions about why, looking at product usage or customer service logs or survey feedback before proposing changes. So if they're lacking literacy, they might react to the churn number alone and make costly changes without understanding underlying cost. That happens all the time.
Hmm.
Reactionary, right? Or not questioning the lineage of a metric, or a lot of finger pointing different ways of like, well, I don't agree on the calculation, like a lack of accountability between teams, that kind of thing. AI literacy would be understanding how AI systems work, their limitations, and where to apply them responsibly. So an example of that would be, and this is a murky space,
Mm.
right? So an HR leader, and they make an easy target because of this, but an HR leader uses an AI resume screener to narrow candidates, but runs multiple bias tests on the model, retrains it with more representative data, and designs structured human reviews that focus on skill-based evaluation rather than culture fit, right?
Mm.
So if they're lacking AI literacy, they might rely on human review as a safety net without realizing that reviewers carry their own bias. We know that reviewers carry their own bias, but reviewers are going to bring bias regardless. And so that whole example has bias fraught within it, right? Even without the AI. And so, um, but it just, and we haven't corrected that. Like we haven't
Hmm.
corrected that even before we added AI into it. So there's bias on top, right? And that in and of itself is a problem. And and we haven't even begun to discuss that issue. Not just using HR as the example, but the bias with the bias on top,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I don't know if enough attention was paid to the sorts of bias that, especially that you were just talking about for many, many years, it seems like,
Yeah.
right? And then now the spotlight has been shown in a way that we are like, oh, wait, how much of this can we adjust? How much can we fix? Is it possible, in your opinion, or have you seen, Christine, being able to go back and tackle something like bias, even in the data?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's just leadership will. That's
Mm,
will and backbone, right? So I'm not going to tackle that question other than to say yes, it's possible. It's up to the leader of the team and that culture to tackle it. And
hmm
yes, I've seen it. Yes, it's possible. And it's empowering and it's wonderful when it happens.
Wow.
Does it happen a lot? No. Does it take a lot of effort? Absolutely.
Okay.
Um, is it is it does it work with tacked on programs like does sustainability programs make it happen? No, it's one of those value driven,
Mhm.
right? It has to be a value driven kind of thing. Um, and so it's why data literacy alone isn't enough, right? So because knowing how to read a dashboard doesn't mean you can connect that insight to the right decision, right? Challenging an AI generated sort of gets to your question, right? So challenging an AI generated recommendation or adapt when the business model shifts. So like fluency is about the full chain.
Mm,
That's what I was getting at, that full supply chain. Are you willing to make corrections through the entire thing? That is the kind of thing where quality is everyone's job. Values, we are living our values in every aspect of this cycle. Um, and that's a quality driven culture. That's different.
hmm
And so you have to ask, well, what kind of environment am I working in? What's the ethos that I'm working in? How are we going to what lens through which are we going to make decisions? So I'll give you an example. Like when I was at Amazon, they have maybe, I don't know what they've got, like 15 principles that run the company now, and no one remembers all of them. They remember like three, right? And the three that when I was there were bias for action, maniacal customer um, focus, and I don't remember what it was, something else. Like something about data, rigorous, something about rigorous data. And so those three really drove every decision. Now, those are three very important, very distinct values, and through which um, every decision was made. And made that culture at the time I was there very distinct.
mm.
At Microsoft, when I was there, certain values drove that decision making. I don't know if you read the article, The Lost Years, where it talks about like the cartel culture.
I
It's
haven't.
all the pointing everywhere else. I can't think off the top of my head what values drive that. It's sort of like Game of Thrones, like it's very political, right?
Hmm.
And it would be data driven, but data driven with a different agenda, right? Um, and so there's different behaviors that drive, different values that drive that decision making. You'd get a very different result at the end. If you were at Apple, you'd have three different values that would drive it. You'd get three different products at the end of it, right?
Hmm.
That's so that the values drive everything. Um, and and so that's why literacy by itself isn't the silver bullet.
Right. Yeah.
It's a combination of those things. And so values will be infused as a bias, like values are a bias, right? They'll be infused in the code, they'll be infused in the decision making.
Kind of moving forward from that, I wonder, Christine, if you think it's a big deal for organizations to be looking out for the individual usage of AI if there is not some sort of core principles, espouted by leadership throughout to create this culture. Because what we've seen as well recently is that, whether or not leadership is aware, AI tools are being used, within the organization, even if they haven't introduced them, implemented, them organizationally. people individually may start to use these tools on their own. I think that might have even been touched on in that first question there. But
Yeah,
how big of a problem do you see that? And can these types of, cultural principles, maybe
yeah.
lessen the impact of something like that?
Well, I think what you're getting at is, as they're starting to build digital fluency, I think it's important to build toward a shared common language,
Hmm.
right? And sort of shared common principles about usage. And so using frameworks like what I teach in my course, like I have 5 common skills that we go use in a common project framework, and so and I also talk about sort of 5 common questions that I use with data leaders in terms of how to assess success in their environment, like do you know where to search? Do new and existing employees know where to search for information in your organization to determine where to go if it exists? And most of them don't. And do you know where they can go to ask questions or somebody to help them to find that information? Do you know where to go to speak the language of the data or information to connect with others who do? Do you feel like you can speak up without fear of rejection or ridicule? Do you trust that they can share and trust the insights that they get? So even if they're using tools independently, right?
Hmm.
Can they seek, solicit, speak, have enough psychological safety, and is there governance around these things? And it's generally no, 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 no. Um, and if there aren't those things, then they need a certain common set of skills in order to, and language to acquire them,
Hmm.
right? And that's often the problem is that they're so disjointed across these silos and even within their own team that they need to get some common language and skills to start working together and rowing in the same direction.
So then when it comes to modernization now, kind of moving in that direction,
Mhm.
what are some of the common missteps that businesses make in trying to integrate these new technologies as they move to digital transformation? You might have just been touching on a couple there, but maybe you can expand for me.
Well, related to the first question around AI readiness in general, they don't take a self-inventory first on their own mindset before doing that sort of from to state. And by that I mean they don't treat AI as they they treat AI as a plug and play rather than a multi-phase change effort. And this results in over tooling without building the processes and skills to use those tools well. And so you end up chasing flashy features instead of aligning to strategic business value. And so if you ignore that cultural readiness, it makes adoption slow and inconsistent, and you don't realize your value or your whole ROI, and then you've basically lost your insurance on your investment.
No, I think that's very important to call that out. And I think when it comes to your coursework, I'm assuming a lot of this is going to be covered there, Christine, and you touched on,
Yeah,
some of those great principles. But
yeah.
as a final question for you, can you tell us a little bit more in detail about what people can expect in your course?
Yeah, it gives leaders a practical roadmap for sustainable AI adoption. So we cover a couple of core pillars around readiness. We apply a data project framework. All of this is covered in the book, but makes it more practical. And it's basically about taking the panic out of what their next step is. And by the end, they'll leave with a phased action plan and a toolkit for leading AI initiatives and a better understanding of the human and technical capabilities kind of bound together that make modernization succeed.
Well, I know that we could have gone on for at least another hour, hour and a half, and I'm unfortunately we have to keep it relatively short. We don't want to give too much away from the coursework, but for folks that are interested, I will of course put a link in the description of this episode for more information about the course and for more information about TDWI Orlando. It will be taking place November 16th through the 21st, and this course in particular, I believe, is on the 16th. Christine, with that, I will bid you adieu. Thank you again for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you. I look forward to having a chance again later in the future. But
No,
thanks
thanks for
again.
having me. Bye.
To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit TDWI.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.